Sanbonani Pimalang, good evening and welcome to episode 254 of the Private Property Podcast. I'm your host, Uzamandungwa Khumalo. It's a Thursday edition of the Private Property Podcast, and if you're joining us for the first time, welcome to it. This is the only daily property talk show in South Africa that you can count on to help you navigate your property journey. And it doesn't matter whether you're a tenant, a landlord, whether you're still staying at home, whether you're looking to buy, sell, or even build your next property. This is your go-to property podcast that helps you on all your property needs. And of course, to our regular viewers, welcome to it. You know how we do it every single weekday at 7 p.m. Myself, Zamandungwa Khumalo, I'm always in conversation with an expert who helps us make better property decisions. And talking of better property decisions, you can, of course, go to our website, www.privateproperty.co.za, to look at the wide array of various properties that we've got listed on. Also, do check out the advice section on the website that will also, play quite a big role in helping you make good decisions and even prep for this show. Because I think one of the great things about this show is we bring the experts that have the answer that can potentially make or help solve something that has been frustrating you for quite a long time. We saw yesterday, as we were talking about FLISP with Matthews from the National Housing Finance Corporation, having an issue there. We've put her in touch with Matthews, and I'm going to make sure that I follow up on that case, and we will definitely report back to you at home. And those are some of the things that we absolutely love doing here on the podcast, is of course assisting you where we can so that you can certainly get that next property that you have your eye on. Now, talking about, of course, properties, there are also other shows that touch on all things relating to real estate right here across the Private Property social media pages. I am talking about the Farming Podcast that's brought to you by award-winning farmer Umbali Noko, that comes to your screens every single Tuesdays and Thursdays, and you can look forward to it later on the evening. This is the show that's going to be coming to your screens at 8 p.m. So if you've got an interest in agriculture, then do make sure that you tune in. I think one of the great things about that show is it really does give you insight into what you can expect should you want to go into agriculture. And sometimes perhaps you're just interested and you want to know what the production value chain of all things relating to farming looks like, then that certainly is the show to watch. And every Mondays and Fridays, Chad brings us the Home Shoppers Show. All of you who are in the market for a new property, that is a show that you should tune into. And that, of course, helps you on all your property needs, as he always is driving around and taking us through exquisite properties. And some of those properties, actually not even some, all of those properties are on our website. Of course, that's www.privateproperty.co.za. And on Wednesdays, Esty Clarkson is in conversation with people who have grown their property portfolio from strength to strength. I'm talking about the First Time Home Buyers Show with Esty Clarkson that is on your screens every single Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Well, those are some of the shows that you can look forward to across our social media pages. So do make sure that you are following us on Facebook, on Instagram, on YouTube, as well, of course, as now we are on TikTok, and you'll be seeing Esty there creating really great videos. Are they called TikToks? I mean, I consume TikTok, but I'm not on it. I love the videos that people often make from TikTok. I don't know if we call the video people make from their TikToks or not. And so if that is what it's called, it would be great. I'll actually ask Esty if that's what we call the final product of all the great content that she puts out there on TikTok, if you call them TikToks or not. Well, those are some of the social media platforms you can catch us on. Follow myself at Zamandungwa_K on Twitter, as well as on Instagram. This evening, we're going to be talking about something we touched on a few weeks ago. And I remember when we spoke about it, we're speaking to somebody also from APSA, and the way in which APSA also just goes about assisting people at home when it comes to making sure that we are creating more sustainable homes, that we are, of course, also being mindful of our energy consumption as much as possible. And I think now more than ever, green issues used to be that thing that I'll say the environmentalists used to be concerned about, but we're now seeing the value of also being interested in how we can live in more sustainable households or make our households more sustainable because of the cost factor. When we look at the cost of, particularly our electricity bill, we tend to find that, a lot of us are spending quite a lot. I know that one of the viewers, when we had this episode, said that she only spends 200 rands on electricity. And I was quite shocked because I think that is such an impressive amount to be able to spend on your electricity. And this evening, we're looking at solar solutions for a more sustainable home. Our guest this evening is somebody that we've had on the show who needs no introduction. It's Glen from Vyver, who is a sales agent at Maxlite. Glen, good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Good evening, Zama. Thank you very much for the opportunity, and good evening to all the listeners and viewers. It's nice to be back and chat solar to you.
Glen, it's always so great to speak solar to you because you have your finger on the pulse on this one. I always admit whenever we talk about solar, whenever we talk about environmental issues, that this is not my beat. It's one of those things I want somebody else to handle it. I'm very likely to not overthink how we can make whether it's a building or a property more green, because I know that's where a lot of where we are now, especially in construction, looking at green buildings, what goes into green buildings. Even when it comes to office spaces, are we trying to be as economical about, our energy consumption? All those things, that stuff is fantastic. It's just not my beat. But this evening, of course, we have to tackle this because viewers at home are going to benefit, even though it isn't quite something that, sounds sexy. It's one of those things that affects the bottom line. And if there's something about property investors in particular that a lot of us value is the bottom line. I think the first place to start at, Glen, is why solar? And I ask this, even though we've asked it before, but perhaps even for some of those viewers who are new, why go solar, or perhaps why even consider to go solar?
Yeah, Zama, that's probably the biggest question that most people start struggling with is why going solar. And I think that the answer is two sides to that. The first side is one, to save on electricity. Obviously, for every cent you can save, there's a return on investment, and there's benefit in the future. I think the other side to that, to why solar is a lot to do with security of supply these days. If you're running a business and there's potentially load shedding and your business is IT related, well, you don't want to be out of power or out of the ability to earn an income. So the two sides to this, as we sort of see it, is one, security of supply, and two, to make the savings. And the choice we always suggest is probably a balance of somewhere in the middle. From a domestic perspective, you look at things in one space. You maybe just need hot water and television and lights for security and entertainment. But when you're a factory manufacturing product, you need a different brand of power to ensure that you're sustainable for your business.
And I want to hear from viewers at home if you've gone solar, and how did you find the cost of your electrical bill post going solar when you compare it to when you were still on the, I'll say fully on the grid, or using electricity the way that many of us at home would typically use it. Perhaps the only solar thing that you've got is just a solar geyser. And I know some people would put in a solar geyser, would make sure that their stove is, for example, a gas stove. So a lot of the times the stuff that they use for electricity is, your fridge, your microwave, for example, in the kitchen, or perhaps some of the lights. But you essentially do have quite a nice mix of how you use your energy supply at home. So do share with us how you found your electrical or your energy bill, because perhaps it's solar plus the, your gas, because I know some people say they spend quite a lot on gas. So I'm quite interested in those who use gas. I'm quite scared of gas oftentimes. And so it's one of those things where I love the convenience, but I'm also very scared of it, and often get very paranoid when it comes to, closing it. Have I adequately closed the thing? Especially when you're putting on gas heaters or is there gas that's kind of leaking? So I do get slightly paranoid. But, Glen, to come back to our issue of solar solutions, particularly for our households or even for rental properties, I think let's look at then how we help viewers at home get a sense of what that transition would look like. So if right now you're using electricity the way that many of us use it at home, and you don't have any kind of solar solutions in your home, what would sort of be, I'll say, the starter pack version, and perhaps take us through what would then sort of be the middle, let's call it package, and then the high-end package of somebody who almost makes sure that almost all their electrical supply is from a solar energy source?
So it's a very good question. What's the starting point for a domestic application? And without a doubt, the starting point for a domestic application is your solar water heater. Converting your geyser or replacing your geyser, installing a appropriately sized solar water heater onto your house, and delivering hot water to your usage. That is by far the biggest consumer of power in your house, and that'll make the single most significant impact on your bill. It's definitely the low line fruit of it. Thereafter, we encourage people to look at it in steps and probably looking at your immediate needs. So if you're considering security of supply, for example, or something to give you entertainment when there's a grid outage, you could put entertainment and security and some lighting onto a smaller system, and the next month or three later you could put in another smaller system that covers a little bit more, perhaps your fridge and something else, and sort of build up systems using smaller systems rather than going for one larger system. One, it's more affordable, and two, it allows you to sort of gain confidence in solar. A lot of people aren't confident in solar, and the question around the solar geyser is it actually going to be hot enough? But the truth behind a solar geyser is it gets far hotter than a conventional geyser. If you have the right volume of water, solar gets a lot hotter than a conventional geyser. In the plumbing world, you have special mixing valves and special valves that are designed for and written into standards to mitigate the hot water coming out of the tap, because it can be so much hotter. There is no thermostat in the sun, so hot water gets hotter if it's exposed. There's also an overheating factor that's got to be considered. So, a proper solar consultant or somebody that's got the knowledge really should be sizing these things correctly. In terms of the step between possibly installing probably solar panels and batteries and inverters, just taking a look around the house and replacing the old incandescent lights with energy efficient LEDs, replacing your downlighters with 3-watt downlighters as opposed to the 50 and 60-watt downlight, replacing 40-watt floodlight outside with a 10 or 20-watt floodlight, and just making simple changes to the lighting around your house. Gas stoves, absolute winner. Today, if you're not cooking with gas, as they say, you've got a problem. You really should be cooking with gas. You get gas hob, and you get a gas oven. Very safe, very effective. You get a gas hob and an electric oven. If you really want to save money and make sure you've got that comfort of having a cooking method when the lights are out, gas is the right way to go.
I am this evening in conversation with Glen van der Vyver, who's a sales agent at Maxlite. As we look at solar solutions, I was saying earlier on that I still have fears around gas, and I see one of the comments that have come in from one of our top fan gang members, Martha Shingani, is saying gas is much safer these days, Zama. I also had my fears at first, but a year later, I'm all good. And earlier on, she said, I'm excited about this discussion because I would like to have my home solar powered in the near future. And we've got another comment here coming from Uklek Chirinda saying, my energy bill is very low, approximately 350. I use a gas stove, heater, and solar geyser in a household of 3 people. I need to get these hacks, because there was a time when I was living alone and my electrical bill was 500 rands, and it's not because I would cook every day. So I mean, if I was one of those people who's cooking every single day, using the oven every day, then I would understand why the high cost. But when I see how other people are able to cut costs and save costs actually in different ways, I think it also gives me hope that I can perhaps shift some of my electrical appliances perhaps to gas, make sure that I finally put solar geyser in place to ensure that as much of my electrical bill goes down. Because unfortunately, one of the things about our electrical bill is that the electrical charge is simply not going to go down. I mean, the cost of a lot of our utilities, if not all, has been consistently going up. So finding different ways to make sure that we deal with those escalating costs becomes so important. Now, Glen, one of the things that you mentioned was how when you're looking at transitioning or changing to solar, you can do it in sort of different steps. You don't have to do one thing at once, because obviously there's also the cost factor. So you can almost decide which types of appliances are first going to be powered by solar. I mean, what kind of time frame are we looking at here when we're looking at that? Suppose you're already staying in a freehold house and you have no solar solution at all. And perhaps the first thing that you very likely look at is, of course, your solar geyser. What kind of typical time frame, especially when it comes to phasing and considering, of course, people's budget? Because one of the reasons why you won't go full solar, from day one, probably when you're transitioning, is because of the potential cost. So just to almost manage our own expectations, what kind of timeframes should we be looking at?
To install solar is very quick. That's a very quick process. Solar geysers on your house to cater for your whole house, probably 4, 5, 6 hours to get in and out. So well within a day. I think probably the biggest dilemma in the people's mind is the time frame to make the decision to go for solar geysers, but to do it is very quick and easy. To do the bigger installations can take a day or 2 to get it done, but it's normally something that can happen quite quickly. Gas stoves are, there's a little bit of intricacies around installing a gas stove, for example, but generally this stuff can happen very quickly and can be done over a very short space of time.
And I think, Glen, perhaps the next sort of big question then for viewers at home is the kinds of costs that we can, potentially anticipate when we are going solar. And I know that it does vary according to, what you go for, the size of the, different panels you put up. But I think just to give viewers at home a relative sense, because one of the things that I've seen is there are quite a number of new players coming onto the market who are offering various solar solutions, especially right now as we've already, winter is around the corner. We're in autumn. In certain places, we know that there's load reduction. I was being load reduced just the other day, so I had to do the show while I had on, the battery that I use. And I think one of the solutions that you actually mentioned, and I wasn't aware, this place, one of the lights, it has like an energy saving something. So when there's no electricity, like the light bulb saves, I'll say, some sort of power that can last, I think, up to 3 hours after there's electric supply to the light bulb. So when you turn it on, you won't know that, you're being load shed. And obviously, as sort of the minutes and the hours go down, it gets dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And I think that's certainly a great, short-term, let's call it short-term solution. But certainly something like a solar solution is great for making sure that you always have you always have security of supply when it comes to electrical. So what kind of costs can we potentially anticipate when we're looking at that, making that transition?
It's very difficult, Summer. You know, everybody's different in terms of how they're going to use power and what their requirements are. For example, you know, a family of four would use a lot more hot water than a bachelor on his own, or a couple of two. So it's very difficult to give you an exact price, and I think a lot of people are always wanting that exact price. You know, how much is it going to cost me? They want to know that price that they can start working towards. It's very difficult to give anybody that price, and one's really got to look at what they're trying to achieve, and sort of give them something to suit that. You speak of a lot of new players. Back when Eskom was rebating solar water heaters, for example, there was an organization called SESA, and the Sustainable Energy Society for South Africa grew from 5 people sitting around a table to well over 700 people. So the growth was astronomical. Everybody thinking that there was going to be opportunity and there was going to be, you know, just solar being thrown out and everybody was going to be buying the stuff. And it didn't quite work out like that. So the shrinkage has been as big, and we're probably back to 5 people sitting around the table. But ultimately, solar was put in place. SESA was put in place as the solar watchdog, and we have an ombudsman, and everybody strives to do the right thing. So the biggest thing in terms of cost that I would say to you is consider what your electrical bill is costing you, and look to the savings, and then start considering what your savings could be. For example, a solar geyser could save you anything from 40% to 50% of your electrical bill per month in a domestic household application. If you're spending 2,000 Rand, you could be saving 1,000 of that, or 800 of that. If you're spending 1,000, you're going to be saving, 400 or 500 Rand of that. And start looking at your bill from, if we're just talking solar geysers, probably 40 to 50% of your bill. If you're talking, security of supply, you might not save a hell of a lot in terms of electricity, but you will have the convenience of having the lights on when the power is out. You could save on putting a system on your outside lights and on your garden lights, so you've got that security of supply, and it works all night, every night. Having lights on is definitely, obviously, a security factor, because people look and see the lights. When there's power outages, the lights are on. The electric fence is working. It doesn't necessarily have a price tag to it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's the closest I can get to a solid answer.
Yeah, and I'll let you off the hook on this one, Glen, even though I know viewers at home probably wanted, to get a sense of rands and cents. But I know, because I've asked you this question before, I've asked other guests as well when we talk about solar solutions. And it really does depend on, the size and, of course, your needs as a household. I want to find out then, Glen, what are some of the things should viewers at home, what are some of the things should they look out for as they make their transition to using, or obviously getting, solar products, solar solutions for their households, so that we also don't make any mistakes as we, change our homes, and of course change them for a good reason. We want to make sure that we save costs and we're as energy efficient as possible. So what are some of the things that we should definitely be on the lookout for as we make that transition?
I think for me, I always think that the biggest thing you want to look for is somebody that actually understands or even owns their own product and builds their own product, and somebody that can really be accountable for what they're trying to sell, and has the knowledge of that. I would be far less comfortable saying to people, go and find a solar provider on the internet. And I see these things popping up all the time. A guy trying to sell a system, and he's trying to sell this system, or that system, or that system, or the next system, just depending on what your budget is. Sometimes you actually want to go to a guy that says, this is the right system. And when you've got those people that say, this is the right system, consider what the maintenance costs are behind that system. Consider what the running costs are behind that system. Consider how effective that thing goes onto the roof. or onto a space that's going to be used. You know, if it's a makeshift solution, it'll probably have a makeshift bracket and panel, etc., that's going to have to be made shift to work. Whereas a purpose-built solution is going to have a purpose-built frame or a purpose-built stand to work. So that, I think, is probably the most important thing. Look for operations and organizations that are sticking to what they know, have the knowledge behind it, and have a purpose-built solution.
Mm-hmm. And Glen, before I let you go this evening, any final tips for our viewers at home as they consider and even transition to solar solutions for their households?
Start with your geyser. 40 to 50% of your bill sits in your geyser. It's the low-lying fruit. Yes, security of supplies is awesome. You know, just to give you a figure for satisfaction, you know, you could quite easily get your lights and your television done for in and around the 20 grand mark, if not less. But you could, you know, start with your geyser. That's the biggest cost consumer in your house.
Well, Glen, we are going to leave it there this evening. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Zama. Always nice to talk to you.
And that is Glen van der Vyver, who's a sales agent at Maxlite. And that brings an end to this evening's podcast. It certainly has been a pleasure to be with you. From myself, Zamantungwa Kumalo, and the rest of the Private Property Podcast team, we do hope that you'll be staying home, staying safe at 8 p.m. You can look forward to the Farming Podcast with Umbali Nwoko.